Pokerogue is the latest attempt at making Pokemon into what's known as a roguelike, a genre of games where you kinda bash your head against a wall until you win against permadeath and procedurally generate levels.
Come on! Yeah!
For the fan game, Pokerogue in particular, we have to clear a gauntlet of 200 randomly generated Pokemon battles filled with a ton of boss fights, which can sometimes have multiple HP bars for no reason. And just like every new Pokemon game that comes out, I decided to speedrun it immediately, which was a horrible idea. Here's one of those reasons why. And before I actually started doing runs and giving myself carpal tunnel, I developed this rule set that essentially limits me to most basic options available to a new player. And so, with the rules set and ready to go, I began scavenging any information on the 27 starter Pokemon I had access to in order to develop a decent strategy. While there are a crazy amount of random factors in Pokerogue, I knew at the very least if I had made it far enough that I'd probably need something to deal with the final boss Eternatus and my rivals Mega and Regular Rayquaza. So out of all 19,683 starter combinations I could choose from, I ended up with Fuecoco, Sprigatito, and Popplio? The last choice might seem confusing to some, but I think... Listen, I know 14 attempts looks bad, but I did make it all the way to floor 200 on my second try, kept trying weird strategies I thought were good, and ultimately came up with the team I just mentioned due to my failures, which brought me to my most promising attempt yet, number 14. Early on into Pokerogue, I decided it would be best to raise both Fuecoco and Popplio to level 7 as soon as possible, since your rival seemingly chooses her starter at random, starting at floor 8. Going towards that floor, things were off to an amazing start since I ended up rolling two very important key items to my success. The first being the EXP All, which gives experience to your entire party without having to switch train Pokemon, as well as what I consider to be the most important item for speedrunning, the map. The way the map item works is that you get to choose which biome you end up in every 10 floors, starting from floor 20 onward. And since each biome specializes in the type of Pokemon that spawn within the next 10 floors of being inside that biome, you can just pick one that your team is good against instead of leaving it up to chance. So with a recipe for success on my side, I began sweeping through those 7 floors and soon discovered that my rival had chosen Litten as her starter of choice. This was probably the best type of Pokemon she can choose for my sake, considering Popplio's future move pool obliterates most of her team with water, fairy, and ice coverage. But things got even better once I obliterated her on floor 8, since I now had a chance to grab two potentially amazing candidates to add to my team. Without hesitation, I obliterated Tailo and threw Tandemaus straight into my party. Now, I know a lot of you Nuzlocke fans might adore the power of Tailo, but Tandemaus's moveset and ability have way more necessary utility for both single and double battles. Now, moving forward, floors 10, 20, 25, and 30 would be the next benchmarks I'd have to plan against. The reason these floors are important to note is because boss fights can occur on each of them. So going into this, my plan would be to make sure that I had a second stage evolution on Fuecoco or Popplio before at least reaching my rival, since I knew she would be packing second stage evolutions herself. As I then made my way into floor 20, I wasn't actually greeted with a gym battle, which now meant, according to the Pokerogue wiki, that these floors on the screen would be guaranteed gym battles, so I could instead focus completely on my rival from here on out. Crazy to say, but I actually exceeded a ton of my own expectations by grabbing so many rare candies that I was able to evolve both Popplio and Fuecoco just before reaching floor 25 rival fight. This fight in particular was an important one to note, since each new fight usually gives her a new party member that she'll bring to future fights. And the teammate she ended up bringing was Drampaw, a normal dragon type Pokemon. This made me incredibly happy to see, since adding another dragon type Pokemon meant that 4 out of 6 of her teammates would be weak to Primarina by the time I made it to some of Pokerogue's biggest run killing rival fights on floor 145 and 195. As for floor 25, I obliterated her on the spot and moved on to the next threats. Now, if you've played Pokerogue enough, you can likely tell that I chose the grass biome to be the biome of choice from floors 20 all the way to 30, which not only locks wild Pokemon into being grass types, but also the up-and-coming gym leader. So starting from floor 26 all the way to 30, Fuecoco would burn down every wild Pokemon and the grass gym leader Erica with fire move after fire move, burning her gym down in front of her, just like in the anime. For doing this, I was promptly rewarded with the candy jar item, which increases the amount of levels a rare candy gives you by double the amount. And with all these amazing items and third stage evolutions right around the corner, things would begin to pick up quite fast. In particular, Meowscarada and Skeledirge did an amazing job of sweeping a crazy amount of floors starting from 31 all the way to 100 without a single issue. Throughout all of these floors, I would prioritize vitamins on Primarina and Skeledirge, grab rare candies, a ton of healing items, and attempt to avoid double battles as much as humanly possible. But the thing is, I knew that once I had gotten past floor 100 that I would need more than 4 Pokemon in my party for this team to survive till the very end. This led me to finding a wild Gyarados and Empoleon due to picking water biomes at a constant rate with the map. Why these Pokemon in particular? Well, I'm sure I don't really need to explain how ridiculous Gyarados is to most people, but Empoleon, while not a great starter choice for the early to mid portions of the game, would absolutely be one of the key players I needed to win Classic mode, all thanks to its water steel typing. Moving forward, progressing from floors 100 all the way to the infamous floor 145, I was lucky enough to snag not only a Mega Bracelet, but also a Gyarados to change my Gyarados to Mega Gyarados, giving it the amazing Water Dark typing with an extra 100 base power to its stats. And what better way to test its power than to obliterate the floor 145 rival? My plan going into this fight would be to get rid of any threats standing in the way of Primarina. So I decided to do this best, I would need to lead Mega Gyarados in order to try and set up as much as possible. Unfortunately, this didn't last long, and I honestly should have attacked from the get-go, since this version of the rival is prone to switching before you can even make a move. This ended up putting me directly in front of the crazy Rayquaza I talked about earlier in the video, as they chunked my Gyarados extremely hard with Outrage. This prompted me to immediately switch into Primarina to stop the Outrage while also trying to hit it with a super effective Moonblast, but they ended up swapping once again until I finally got some decent damage off on Primarina's biggest threat yet, Electivire. So in order to keep my momentum and Primarina alive, I ended up swapping straight into Maushold to click Super Fang to not only chunk Electivire, but also as a means to safely swapping into Meowscarada once Maushold had died. Given Meowscarada's insane stats, I knew I had a solid chance of outspeeding and KOing Electivire from the get-go, but smart AI came in once again to a swap into Rayquaza. So I annoyingly decided to let Meowscarada do his thing, and it somehow managed to play rough past the entirety of Rayquaza's HP bars. However, I decided to sacrifice it for some reason when I should have just swapped to Mega Gyarados instead. This didn't feel like a big deal at the time since it gave me a free switch into Primarina, who nearly destroyed Incineroar before Goldango popped out and went for Memento? Really weird stuff from the AI, but I can't really complain since this sacrificed one of Primarina's biggest counters, leaving me the perfect opportunity to mow through Drampaw and Toucannon. But what I really needed to deal with was the Electivire. Now, the big reason why I mentioned Meowscarada dying being a mistake is because I soon found out that Electivire was holding the item Reviver Seed, which is essentially a held item that brings a Pokemon back to life at half HP once it dies. This is really broken for multiple reasons and put me in a really bad situation since I only had Skeledirge and Primarina left alive on my team. And so, all I could really do was hope and pray that Thunder wouldn't critter paralyze me as I sent out Skeledirge, went for Torch Song, and by some miracle, Electivire missed. Skeledirge worked his magic by spamming Torch Song and Shadow Ball, and I took home a very sweaty victory. With this benchmark fight out of the way, it'd be quite a while before I'd find myself in more trouble. So to summarize floors 150 to 180, I one-shot literally everything, including the floor 150 and 180 gym leaders. Battles 182, 184, 186, 188, and 190 would be the ones that I'd have to worry about since this section is where you face a random Elite Four and champion all from the same region. The ones I ended up rolling were the Generation 5 Elite Four, which gave me zero clues as to which champion I'd be facing, since there's technically 2 of them in the region. I gotta say though, these Elite Four members were a complete joke to my team, since the combo of Skeledirge and Mega Gyarados mowed through them super cleanly. But unfortunately, the champion I ended up pulling was Iris. who would prove to be a massive challenge given the crazy diversity on our team compared to Alder. She ended up leading with Dodrio while I led with a Mecha Gyarados. Now, given how underwhelming Dodrio actually is, I thought it'd be an incredibly easy Pokemon to set up on. However, I was caught extremely off guard by just how powerful a stab boosted Terra Normal Thrash actually was and lost my Gyarados in 2 hits. To make it even worse, Thrash lasted a total of 2 turns before confusing her, so I couldn't exactly take advantage of it locking itself into a normal move with Skeledirge's ghost typing. This put me in this ridiculous snowball effect since I now had to deal with the smart AI swap to her Lapras resisting my Torch Song as I swapped to Meowscarada, as she then swapped one more time into an Yveltal resisting my grass moves. Now, normally, champions don't exactly have access to legendary Pokemon such as Yveltal, but Pokerogue guarantees that they have at least one no matter what champion you're facing. And considering the current circumstances, I was in such a rough spot to be facing down one and figured good old reliable Primarina would hopefully be able to handle this monster. So I swapped straight into it as Yveltal locked itself into Sky Attack, hit Primarina as I clicked Moonblast, and it flinched me. But here's the thing, I gathered so many berries on my Primarina that my HP, special attack, and speed skyrocketed from my HP going all the way down to red. So as all good Pokemon players do, I decided it was time to lock in and just try to sweep with my berry power up even if they tried to switch. This let me instantly take out Aggron and Lapras pretty easily, but I somehow didn't outspeed her Dodrio with a speed boost. However, I was extremely okay with this since Dodrio locked itself into Thrash once again, letting me set up a bit with Torch Song before she would bring Yveltal back out. Now, considering Skeledirge is very weak to the dark type moves on Yveltal, I was extremely terrified. But for some reason, it went straight for Sky Attack as I swapped over to Mousehold. But I did at least get to lower its physical attack with Charm before it crit me, giving me a free switch into Empoleon, who didn't really care what was brought in as I was clicking Icy Wind. And with all the chip damage I had done to her entire party and the big -1 to speed, I was now in the perfect position to sweep the rest of her team with Skeledirge and Meowscarada for a somewhat sweaty victory, which meant that we only had a total of 10 floors left before finishing the rest of Pokerogue, with 2 gigantic milestones coming up quickly. Going forward, my goal for the next few floors would be to gather as many X items as possible and hope and pray that I could bring myself up to level 200. Luckily, I managed to grab an X defense, X speed, and X special defense along the way. However, only Mega Gyarados managed to get close to level 200, so I kinda had to hope that defeating some of my rivals' team members would fill in the gap for the rest of my party. Leading our team, as usual, was her Terrifier, Incineroar, that I foolishly swapped Primarina into, hoping that she would try and go directly into her mega shiny Rayquaza. But instead, I was greeted with her annoying Electivire that paralyzed my Mousehold immediately. But luckily, Super Fang still chunked her really hard before she eventually swapped into Goldingo the next turn. This gave me an extremely safe switch into Skeledirge, which promptly destroyed her Drampaw with ease, as she would eventually bring in her Mega Rayquaza as an answer. In response, I immediately sent out Empoleon to Icy Wind, but missed as she locked herself into Outrage. Now, there is nothing that I hate more than missing a move. So I got really annoyed and started rage spamming Icy Wind twice to bring her Rayquaza's HP down 2 entire health bars and its speed down with it. Once Empoleon had eventually fallen, I sent in Primarina to try and finish this monster off, but my greed once again got the better of me as I clicked Moonblast, knowing very well that her Goldingo would be switching in. However, I was okay with this given that I could sacrifice my low HP Mousehold for a free swap into Meowscarada, who did a horrible job of hitting his moves on Rayquaza as it swapped in. But at the end of the day, this actually didn't matter too much since I was now in a solid position to sweep with Primarina and Mega Gyarados, who barely survived till the very end, giving me the best shot I had had so far to finishing a Pokerogue speedrun. With 5 floors left to go, I made it my goal to try and lead Mega Gyarados on all fights that I could, as well as skip Rare Candy since the final boss does increase damage to Pokemon above level 200. Then once I had reached floor 199, I ended up making my biggest mistake so far throughout the entire run. My initial plan for the first phase of Eternatus was to one-shot it with an Earthquake, but a +2 Earthquake only did half of their HP before my Mega Gyarados straight up died. And to make things even worse, my Primarina that I've been hyping up since the beginning of this run didn't do enough damage to push it into phase 2, which gave Eternatus just enough time to damage my Primarina into red HP. Now normally this wouldn't be a problem between rounds, but round 199 and 200 aren't normal rounds, because once phase 1 is over, you get locked straight into phase 2 without being able to use items between rounds, which meant that I had to go into the Eternamax fight with red HP on my Primarina and a completely dead Mega Gyarados. However, even with my back against the wall, I was now in the perfect position to bring in Mouse Hold on the side, since phase 2 of Eternatus is a double battle. As the final battle commenced, I immediately began to spam Icy Wind on Primarina and Super Fang on Mouse Hold. Do you all happen to remember how I hyped up Mouse Hold at the beginning of this video? Well, it turns out that Super Fang on boss fights is pretty busted, considering it takes an entire percentage of the boss's HP bar instead of just a flat amount. And the best part was that I could continue to do the strategy with my Empoleon in the back once Primarina went down. Crazy thing is, I was doing such a ridiculous amount of damage so fast that this nasty boss even tried to use the move Recover. But that didn't matter whatsoever, as I easily managed to get it back down to red HP before it obliterated all but 2 of my party members. And luckily for me, these party members had just enough juice to finish the fight and clear the first ever Pokerogue 80% Classic Mode speedrun in... Hang on. Before I tell you the final time and you click off of this video, I just want to say that I think I can do better than 1 hour 23 minutes and 50 seconds. So please get out of full screen mode, click my avatar that says live as the video goes up, and you can witness me trying to beat this game in under 1 hour. But until next time, thanks for watching and consider subscribing.